I am that girl that came from a broken home. I'm that girl that had issues and a lot of struggles, growing up. Um, my parents got separated when I was 4, and it wasn't funny, and that was how struggle began. So I am that girl who experienced being a dropout in school, who experienced narrow escape from rape, from ritual,
Wow.
killers, and a lot of other things. I'm that girl who has forged her way, despite challenges, and has come to the limelight, of course, and we are still coming. So that is
Absolutely.
Rachel today. And growing up my growing up could be described as overwhelming and that of hopelessness. Overwhelming because when my mom left my dad, and we were in the village then, and my dad had this house he built, so we were just alone in the compound. So, and the eldest of us was about 10 years or so at the time. So it was like a child taking care of other children, and
Right.
a lot of times we were alone. A lot of times we were sick. My father could go for on outside work, and there wasn't anyone taking care of us. So the challenge grew so much that it became almost part of us. We got overwhelmed with it, but there was nothing we could do. So at the point, I felt that life is just that way all through. So that's why I say I was overwhelmed. It became something I couldn't do anything about, and from right, left, front, and back, it was loneliness, it was problem, it was fatherlessness, and all that. And then it was so hopeless because we didn't know when it would end.
Because you spoke about poverty, you spoke about hunger. As a child growing up, I can imagine, what was that like? What kind of things would you have to put together to make ends meet? 4 children, a mother. How did you go through that? What were those days like? What would you have to do?
Okay, like I remember some of the times my dad wasn't around, and hunger, got us rough-handed. I mean, hunger rough-handed us. I remember at certain times we had to make some some African salad, as it's described. And this thing couldn't even be fermented, and we were eating it like that. It was exposing ourselves to health risks. So there were other times where I had to do business as a child. My situation taught me that a child can do business, not just an adult. Could you imagine a 9-year-old child trying to go sell, in fact, trying to cook? It's even now I'm still trying to remember what exactly did my stew look like, the stew that I used for the rice. I mean, I couldn't imagine what it looks like, but I had to sell.
Because I think that what we have to understand is that when it comes to adversity at any age, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to go through challenges in life, things that happen to us, things that happen to us without not because it's our fault, but we just find ourselves in the situation. But as a child, going through an adversity, it's intensified. It's worse. It's like these are the years that you're supposed to be enjoying. These are the years that you're supposed to be, innocent, enjoying yourself, having fun, playing. But you're forced to do labor like an adult. You're forced to have a burden of an adult. You're forced to have that burden as an adult just to try and help and make ends meet. So because I'm trying to figure out now, Sister Rachel, what I'm trying to think about is, with all of this going on, what was going on at school? Because of course, something emotional is happening to you in your mind psychologically. How did you cope at school? How were your days at school? How did you function? Was it successful? Did you have to leave school? Tell us a bit about your education.
There was a comment you made that actually touched my heart, and I don't want to be emotional on this video. I mean, I want to behave like an adult. But believe me, I could a lot of things are getting refreshed in my mind. Because you made a comment, you said at the time where you should be enjoying, you were there, grudging back in pains. Could you believe there was a time in my life when the biggest need I had was to have a woman I could call mommy. You know, I mixed up with kids, and the word mommy was very popular. I had no woman under heaven I could call my mommy. It was a pain. I desired to have a mommy. Another pain I had was it got to a point where I began to tell myself, I said, Rachel, do you know the truth? If your mommy appears here now, you don't know her. Because this thing happened at a very tender age. So I got a point where I wasn't very sure again. I could still remember the face of the woman that it's my mom. So I just told myself, you know what? If this woman appears among, let's say, 3 women that aren't looking at like, I would know which one is my mom. But if she appears among people who look at like, I may not know who my mom is.
And one thing you wanted was to say, call somebody your mother. You know, to call somebody your mother, to put a face to this person. You know, to be able to, because even when you go to school and you're speaking to your friends, a lot of times we do speak about our parents. Oh, what are you going to eat today? Exactly. What did your mom cook for you? You're reminded of your parent, because at the time your parents are very heavily looking after you. Very much, are they going to collect you from school? You know, all of these type of things.
Actually, one of the things I suffered a lot in my education was anxiety. Let me explain. From primary school, I never attended nursery school as a child. From primary school, I could go to school. Actually, I was very brilliant. I mean, I used to be very brilliant. It's now that I don't know what happened to my brilliance. I used to be very intelligent as a child. So when I went to school, as you mentioned, other kids could say, my mommy gave me this, my mommy bought this for me.
Yeah.
Now I had no mommy doing that for me.
Yes.
Most times too, that was a pain. So that when I came to school, instead of being very happy with other kids, the moment they began, mommy said, mommy gave, I would go back to my shell. And that would make me moody for the day. Again, was anxiety. Anxiety in the sense that, okay, before I got to the anxiety level, I was given to people. First, I was given to an old woman and her daughter who was a widow at the time. Both of them were widows. The woman's husband was dead. The daughter's husband was dead. So the daughter returned to her house, and I was given to them as a maid. At this point, I would be around 8. That was before I did the rice selling that I mentioned, the food selling that I mentioned. Yes. So this woman subjected me to series of domestic abuse. So I was also taking care of the baby, the widow, the younger widows and babies. So at least, whereas the dads were late, at least they had mom. So every they would run to their mom. They would run to their mom. Sometimes the mom would sometimes I would just be watching the mother's-children relationship. How mothers care, even how mothers overcare, even give enough of this thing called care. And I would just be envying the kids. So even now, that was it. Now, when I began school, in the school, most times, as I said, as other children will be mentioning their parents and their moms, especially mom. At this time, I was given to another auntie, another family. So I was living with other people. My uncle's wife, which was a woman I was actually living with, exposed me to a different kind of pain or different kinds of pain. It was this particular family's house, in this particular house that I attempted suicide many times. I was around 11 then. Because of the series of pain I met, at a point, it got so bad that I went to school. I was doing so well. My teacher in school said, Ginika, you are such an intelligent child. You don't need to be in, I was in primary 4. She said she would promote me to primary 5. Because I was already taking first, I was doing so good. So she felt that being in primary 4 was a waste of time. She would promote me to primary 5.
Yes.
I came back home and I told my mistress, I said, Auntie, that my auntie in the school said, that I would be promoted to another class. You know what she said?
What did
she looked at me, I was like, who told you I brought you here to train you in school? Okay, you want to rush me?
Someone said, this makes me angry. Okay, let me read a comment. So what we're seeing or what we're reading is compassion. That you've been through this, we can relate, and we are feeling uncomfortable about it. We're saying, how can this happen to a child? You know, how can this happen to a child? And I think that that's the best position to be in as a person, because I think that once we take a position and we look at somebody's circumstance and we are not judgmental, but we are empathetic, we're able to put ourselves in their shoes and think about what they went through. These are the best ways that you can support somebody. I think it starts from that. So I have a question from JE Online, and the question is, did you grow up bitter? Were you bitter? Were you resentful? Were you angry?
Yeah, I think I love this question because I did. Yes, I did. One, I began to see aunties, people who had house helps, as beasts, a kind of people who are inconsiderate. I remember one day my auntie sent me, she was washing. She sent me on a errand. I went, I missed something. I couldn't even remember what exactly it was. I came back, I said, Auntie, I missed something. Let me show you. This is a hanger. This is plastic hanger. So she collected a metal one that I brought for her earlier where she was washing. And the way she held it, she hit it on my forehead. This part of the hanger, I don't know whether there's actually an opening here, but it entered into my skin. This bending entered to a level, and for the first and last time I could see such in my life, instead of her to do the hanger this way so it could come out, she drew it this way, tearing the rest of the flesh. I don't know why I could touch it, but it's so insignificant that I could only touch it. You can see it.
Yes, sis.
These and many more made me see people that have house helps as very wicked people. And one of the people I was bitter with was men. Because while I was in this auntie's house, I was nearly raped by a pedophile. It was a narrow escape. While I was in this same people's and my uncle's house, the young man was a bachelor at the time, and it was a struggle. Good enough, he didn't have a weapon. So we struggled. It was in their room. We struggled, and I was able to break out. So that made me think then that, in fact, I grew to an stage where I accepted that, Rachel, you are not a very strong person. I used to think I'm a very strong person, because for me to overcome that guy, and I couldn't allow him to to touch my pants, I felt I was a superwoman. So I didn't know it was just God that delivered me. Now, I grew up to see, and when my parents were having misunderstanding, I actually witnessed how we went, to an extent that was quite tender. I was around 4, but I could still remember. So what I could see was my dad probably talking or doing 1 or 2 funny things. So I felt men were hard. I felt men were heartless. I grew so bitter that while I was in secondary school, I told myself, Rachel, you are not going to be getting married. I was not going to marry a man. I told myself I was going to live my life in a way that men will come beg me. I told myself, if I wanted to have kids, I would do that outside marriage. I wanted to prove to men that I could live without you. I felt men were too hard. So I grew up bitter, but good enough. When I was a teenager, at 14, I think, I gave my life to Jesus. Because my dad introduced us to Christian faith. My dad preached to us a lot. He wanted to collect Jesus and give to us, but of course that isn't possible. So he wanted to force Jesus into us. So, but eventually I gave my life to Jesus. And the whole thing, it was like reformatting my system. I was reconfigured. So by the time I entered university, I was a changed person. And it was in the university, I told myself, Rachel, you know what? You're going to be getting married to one lovely man somewhere. I took the decision, and I even took the decision that, you know what? You're not just going to be getting married. Your marriage is going to be work. So bitterness about the men now left, and bitterness about aunties. Again, Mary, I must confess, it was when I grew up that I began to see that first, I began to understand what marriage means. And I noticed that it wasn't always my dad that was at fault, as I had always thought. 2, I equally saw my folly as a child, where I was living with my aunties, when I could play, despite all this situation, I could play like crazy. So I thought being too playful was one of the things that angered my auntie, but because he didn't know how to tolerate me, so he could hit me and hit me, So I was bitter at a point, but I overcame it eventually.
Praise God.